Hello, and welcome to ServiceNow Vulnerability Response Core Architecture and Data Model Overview. Out of the box, the ServiceNow Vulnerability Response module integrates with the big three scan vendors, Tenable, Rapid7, and Qualys. We also integrate out of the box with the National Vulnerability Database. These integrations are accomplished via REST API. When integrated with your scanner, we try to match any host information your scanner may have picked up by discovering the environment against what you have in your ServiceNow CMDB. If your scanner has picked up a host that is not currently in your CMDB, ServiceNow will then create a record in the CMDB for that host. Next, we bring in vulnerability information from your scanner. This is put in the third-party vulnerability entry table. It is strictly an informational entry with the summary, the threat, and the fix information from your vulnerability scanner about the pertinent vulnerability. We also bring in vulnerability information that's released from the National Vulnerability Database. This is for all CVEs and gives us all pertinent information like cvss score, attack vector, and what exactly the problem is that the vulnerability presents. And finally, your scanner has found a vulnerability on a host. We bring that data in and drop it in the vulnerable item table. You can see the vulnerable item table is linked to the CMDB, the third-party vulnerability entry table, and the NVD entry library. We have information around the host and the vulnerability in this vulnerable item, which is really a ticket or a task or a unit of work, and is what will be remediated and tracked within ServiceNow. From here, you can see the data points we're pulling from the vulnerable item table can include anything from the vulnerability side, including scanner proprietary severity, cvss score, if there's an exploit available or not for the vulnerability, date last found by the scanner, and the ID of the vulnerability itself. We can also use any data point coming from the CMDB, like asset or application owner, business criticality, operating system, if it's a web-facing asset or not, and what business service the asset may belong to. Because we have all of these data points to use as filter conditions, we can now use those in platform functionality. So what you'll do is group vulnerabilities in bulk and assign those out using filter conditions that have these data points. So if in your environment you want to group and assign vulnerabilities, let's say all vulnerabilities with a cvss score greater than 7 on a web-facing asset with a date published greater than 3 months ago, and on a business critical asset, we're going to group and assign those out to the asset or application owner. Or another option is to use all vulnerabilities with a cvss score greater than 7 with an exploit available and a date published greater than 6 months, and on operating system that contains Windows, so any Windows operating system, and we're going to group and assign those out to the Windows patch team. Next, let's take a look at remediation target rules, or SLAs. These are basically the timeline you establish to remediate certain types of vulnerabilities. And again, we can use these data points to create filter conditions to say any vulnerability with a scanner proprietary severity score greater than 4 on a web-facing asset with a date published greater than 3 months and on a business critical asset needs to be remediated within 30 days. Or any vulnerability with a cvss score between 4 and 7 with no exploit available with a date published greater than 6 months ago and on a business critical high is the criticality, we're going to give that a remediation target of 90 days because there's less risk involved with these data points. And lastly, reporting and dashboarding. One of the biggest parts of successful vulnerability management is being able to see what's out in the environment. And again, we can use these data points to create the visibility for each persona in your organization. So let's say we want to look at all vulnerabilities on business critical assets where the SLA or the remediation target has been breached, and we want to stack that by remediation owner. That would be a great view for the CISO to have. Or all vulnerabilities on business critical assets with vulnerabilities that have a CVSS score greater than 7, stacked by business service. Another great report for the CISO. And finally, all vulnerabilities by vulnerability ID with a remediation target that's due this month and a dynamic filter condition to look at all vulnerabilities that are assigned to me, vulnerable items that are assigned to me. That's a great view for my vulnerability view, a dashboard I would want to see when I log into ServiceNow. And finally, all of these data points we can use and weight them to create a custom risk score or prioritization score to follow your risk model or prioritization model as a customer. And so now that we have a custom risk score or a custom priority for the ticket, we can use those as data points in this other platform functionality as well. So I want to replace CVSS score with my custom risk score for my vulnerability grouping. I want to do that as well for my remediation target rules. And finally, I want to look at my reports with a priority of critical. Thank you for your time.